Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut for getting your head around complex topics. Today, we're diving into self-managed superannuation funds, SMSFs. Now, look, most of us just, set and forget our super in those massive industry funds, right? It's kind of the default path.
It really is.
The easy option. Exactly. But our mission today is to explore how your retirement savings could potentially do a lot more. We're going to unpack SMSFs, look at the direct control they offer, and some, surprisingly powerful strategies, especially for building wealth across generations. So the big question we're tackling is this. What if your super wasn't just for your retirement? What if it could build a lasting multi-generational financial legacy?
That's a really interesting angle. SMSFs, they often get this reputation for being complicated, maybe a bit daunting. But honestly, for people willing to understand them, they really unlock opportunities you just don't get in the big funds. We're aiming for that aha moment today, particularly if you're keen on personal finance and, importantly, figuring out smarter ways to pass wealth on. Okay, let's unpack this then. An SMSF? What actually is it? People hear self-managed super fund, maybe think it's just a personal account. But structurally, it's different, isn't it?
It is, fundamentally, and that's key to its power and, its responsibility. An SMSF is actually a trust. It's regulated by the Australian Taxation Office, the ATO, and while its sole purpose is providing retirement benefits for its members, the crucial bit is the members themselves are the trustees.
Right. Okay, so if I'm a member, I'm also a trustee. What does that direct control actually mean in practice? Sounds like a plus, but maybe a bit of work too.
Exactly. Both. It means you have direct control over, pretty much everything. Investment decisions, compliance, administration. You're steering the ship, not just a passenger. You decide where the money's invested, how it's structured, and crucially, you're the one responsible for making sure it all follows the super rules.
Okay. And how many people can be involved? Is it just for one person, or can, say, a family pool their funds?
You can have up to 6 members in one SMSF, and each member has to be either an individual trustee or a director of a company that acts as the trustee. And actually, most advisors really push for that second option, the corporate trustee.
The corporate trustee. Why is that preferred? What's the advantage there?
Well, a company is its own legal entity separate from the members. This gives you much better asset protection. So if a member faces personal legal issues like bankruptcy, the fund's assets are generally shielded. Plus, it just makes the admin much simpler when people join or leave the fund, which happens over the long term, Super is a decades-long thing.
Makes sense. So if someone's thinking, okay, this sounds interesting, what are the actual first steps, getting it set up, and what sort of costs are we looking at initially?
Right. Practically speaking, you need a trust deed first. That's the rule book for your specific fund. Then all members need to formally consent to be trustees. You register it with the ATO, get a dedicated bank account just for the SMSF. Cost-wise. Establishment usually starts around, say, $2,500. And then ongoing, you're probably looking at $2,500 to maybe $4,000 a year. That covers admin, the annual audit, keeping up with compliance.
I've definitely seen ads for much cheaper setup options, almost too good to be true sometimes. What's the catch there?
Yeah, you really need to be careful with those super low-cost ones, like under $1,000. Often the catch is they push a lot of the tricky compliance work and admin burden back onto you, the trustee, which can end up costing you way more down the track if you miss something or get it wrong. Penalties aren't fun. It's often a false economy.
Right, you get what you pay for. So, okay, we've got the structure, the responsibility, but the reason people take this on is the control over investments, right? The flexibility. What can an SMSF actually hold?
That flexibility is definitely a huge draw card. Now, SMSFs are meant to be passive investors mostly. They can't really run an active day-to-day business. But the range of assets is broad. Listed shares, ETFs, managed funds, term deposits, even things like crypto, collectibles sometimes, and property, of course.
Property.
Right.
That comes up a lot with SMSFs. Are there specific rules around buying property, especially borrowing to do it?
Yes, very specific rules there. If you want to borrow within your SMSF to buy an asset like property, it has to be done through something called a limited recourse borrowing arrangement, an LRBA. Basically, it means if the loan defaults, the bank can only claim the specific asset bought with the loan. They can't touch the rest of your SMSF assets.
Okay, so it limits the risk to the rest of the fund.
Exactly. The property itself is usually held in a separate holding trust or bare trust, while the SMSF makes the loan repayments. And banks are pretty cautious here. They typically lend maybe 60, perhaps 70% of the property's value, and they look at the property's rental income plus your super contributions to see if you can service the loan, not your personal salary.
Got it. And what about the type of property? Does it matter if it's residential or commercial?
Big difference there. Residential property has tight rules. You can't buy it from a related party like yourself or family. And critically, no member or relative can live in it or rent it from the SMSF ever.
Okay.
Commercial property, though, much more flexible. And this leads to a really common, very effective strategy, especially for business owners. They can use their SMSF to buy their business premises, the office, a factory, whatever it is, and then their own business leases it back from the SMSF, paying market rent.
Wow, okay. That sounds like it could generate some serious tax savings over time.
Oh, huge. Think about it. The rent your business pays, which would normally be taxable income for whoever owned the building, instead flows into the superfund, where it's taxed at just 15%, or potentially 0% if the members are in retirement phase. It's incredibly tax effective over decades.
That does sound powerful. But with advantages like that, there must be potential traps or things people need to watch out for with that commercial property strategy.
Absolutely vital point. The tax savings are great. Yes, turning business rent into super contributions, basically. But the main pitfalls. You must ensure the lease agreement is genuinely at market rates. No special deals for your own business. You have to avoid any non-commercial benefits flowing back to the business or the members. Maintain clear separation. The ATO scrutinizes these related party deals very closely. So sticking to the letter of the law is absolutely non-negotiable. Get good advice.
Okay, good warning. Beyond property, any other major no-nos for SMSF investments or dealings with members?
Yeah, a couple of big ones. You absolutely cannot lend money from the SMSF to members or any related parties. That's prohibited. And investments in businesses or trusts run by related parties are capped generally at 5% of the fund's total assets. It's called the in-house asset rule. Oh, and one more thing. All the fund's assets have to be valued at their market rate every single year for the audit. Keeps everything transparent.
Right. So we've touched on control, investments, but the real engine, maybe the secret sauce here, is the tax treatment, isn't it? That's where the money can really compound.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through those tax benefits?
This is definitely where SMSFs really stand out. While you're building up your super in the accumulation phase, any income the fund earns is taxed at just 15%. And if the fund holds assets for over 12 months, any capital gains are only taxed at 10%. That's already pretty good. But the real kicker is the retirement phase. Once you start drawing a pension from your super, the tax rate on all the investment earnings supporting that pension drops to zero. Silch. Plus, any money you withdraw yourself, once you're 60 or over and meet a condition of release, is completely tax-free in your hands.
Okay, just to really hammer that home, 15% or 0%. How does that stack up against, say, running a business in a company or just earning personally?
Oh, it's a massive difference. Company tax is currently 25%. If you use a bucket company to distribute trust profits, that's taxed at 30%. And personal income tax rates, well, they go all the way up to 47%, including the Medicare levy. So when you compare 47%, 30%, 25%, down to 15% or even zero inside super, you can see why it's such a powerful environment for growing wealth, especially for higher income earners.
It really highlights the incentive, doesn't it? Now, quickly, before we move on insurance, big industry funds often bundle it in. What's the story with SMSFs?
Good point. SMSFs don't automatically include insurance like life cover or total and permanent disability, TPD. That's another responsibility for the trustees. You have to actively consider whether the members need insurance cover and then decide whether to arrange it through the fund or perhaps hold it personally outside the fund. And it's often not optional if you're borrowing. If the SMSF has an LRBA for property, the bank will almost certainly require life insurance as security for the loan. Definitely something to factor in.
Okay, noted. So foundations covered, tax benefits clear. Let's shift gears to something really powerful but maybe less understood. Using SMSFs for passing wealth down the generations. Intergenerational wealth transfer. What does this control mean for your family?
This is where things get really strategic and tax planning becomes critical. See, super has different components, typically a tax-free part and a taxable part. That taxable component is basically the bit that grew thanks to those tax concessions over the years, the employer contributions, the earnings. Now, if your super goes to your spouse or dependent child when you pass away, it's usually all tax-free, no problem there. But if it goes to an adult child who is financially independent, that taxable component gets hit with death benefits tax, usually 15% plus the Medicare levy, so around 17%. On a large balance, that can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars lost to tax, money that could have gone to your kids.
Ouch. Okay, so clearly people want to avoid that if possible. Are there strategies within the SMSF to minimize that tax bite for adult kids? Let's talk about that first one, the recontribution strategy.
Absolutely. The recontribution strategy is quite neat, done entirely within the member's own fund. If a member is over 60, they can usually withdraw lump sums from their super completely tax-free. So they take money out tax-free. Then they simply put it straight back into their own SMSF as what's called a non-concessional contribution, basically, an after-tax contribution. What this does effectively is it converts money that was in the taxable component into the tax-free component.
Ah, okay. So it's like cleaning the money from a tax perspective before it potentially gets passed on, turning taxable into tax-free.
That's a great way to put it. You're essentially washing the taxable component over time. So if the member passes away later, more of the balance paid to adult children is tax-free. The main limitation, though, is you have to work within the contribution caps. Currently, that non-concessional cap is $110,000 per year. Or you can use the bring forward rule to contribute up to $330,000 in one go, covering 3 years' worth, assuming you meet the criteria. So it takes time and planning.
All right, that's a clever tool. But you mentioned there's perhaps a more, let's say, aggressive or impactful strategy, one that potentially bypasses that death benefit tax altogether by moving the money before death. Tell us about the early transfer to Children's Super.
Yes, this one is really about proactive long-term planning. It involves a few steps. Step 1. The parent needs to access their super. So a parent, let's say they're over 60, maybe retired or meeting another condition of release, starts taking money out of their own SMSF. They could start a pension income stream like a transition to retirement TTR if they're still working a bit, or just a standard account-based pension if fully retired. The absolute key here is that because they're over 60, these withdrawals are entirely tax-free for them personally.
Okay, step 1. Parent gets money out, tax-free. Then what?
Step 2. Gifting. The parent then simply gifts that cash, the money they withdrew, directly to their adult children. And importantly, in Australia, cash gifts between individuals are generally not taxed. There's no gift duty.
Okay, simple enough. And step 3, what do the kids do?
Step 3 is the children contribute that gifted money into their own superannuation funds, usually as non-concessional contributions using their own caps. So the money flows. Tax-free withdrawal by parent, tax-free gift to child contribution into child super fund, where it gets all those super tax benefits again for decades.
Wow. Okay, that seems quite strategic. Let me just process that.
Yeah.
You're essentially moving wealth from one generation's tax-advantaged super environment to the next generation's while everyone's still alive, and sidestepping a major tax liability down the road. It sounds almost too good to be true. What are the big outcomes here? The benefits?
It really can be transformative if planned correctly. The key outcomes are pretty compelling. First, and most obviously, it completely eliminates that death benefit tax for the adult children on the amount transferred. That's 17% hit, gone. On $1 million taxable component, that's $170,000 saved right there.
Huge saving.
Huge. Second, it's an accelerated wealth transfer. You're getting significant capital into your children's hands, or at least into their super, potentially decades earlier than they'd inherit it. Third, and this is probably the most powerful part, long-term tax-advantaged compounding. That money now sits in the children's super funds, growing in that 15% or 0% tax environment for potentially 30, 40 years or more before they retire. The growth impact is massive.
Right, the compounding effect is key.
Absolutely. Fourth, it can help avoid potential estate issues. Transferring assets while you're alive means that money isn't part of your will, reducing chances of disputes or delays with probate. It's cleaner. And finally, it really enables multigenerational wealth building. You're deliberately keeping wealth within the super system across generations, building a much more enduring financial legacy for the whole family.
That compounding point really strikes me. Could we maybe walk through a quick example just to see the numbers? Let's say a parent age 60 has a $1 million SMSF balance. Assume it's all taxable component, just for simplicity. And they have 2 adult kids, say both 30 years old.
Okay, good scenario. Parent, $1 SMSF, all taxable, 2 kids aged 30. What action do they take using this early transfer strategy?
Right, so the parent is 60 and retired, eligible for tax-free withdrawals. They decide to use the kids' bring forward caps. They withdraw $660,000. That's $330K each for the 2 kids, completely tax-free. They gift that cash to their kids. And the kids immediately contribute their $330,000 each into their own super funds as non-concessional contributions.
Okay, action complete. Now let's look at the 2 paths. What happens if they did nothing?
The doing nothing cost. If that $1 million just stayed in the parent's SMSF until they passed away and was then paid to the adult children, that $1 million taxable component would likely attract about $170,000 in death benefits tax, 17%. So the kids would inherit roughly $830,000 net.
Okay, $830,000 net inheritance doing nothing. Now, the early transfer gain,
With the early transfer, first off, no death benefit tax on that $660K moved. So that $170K is saved immediately on that portion. But the big story is the growth. Each child's $330,000 sitting in their super fund. Let's assume it grows at a reasonable 6% per year for the next 30 years, until they might access it around age 60. That $330,000 could grow to roughly $1.9 million for each child.
Wow.
So combined, that's $3.8 million for the children's retirement, generated from that initial $660,000 transfer. Compare that $3.8 million to the $830,000 they might have inherited otherwise. And remember, the parent still has $340,000 left in their own SMSF, $1 minus $660K, continue to grow tax-free for their own needs. And they could potentially repeat the strategy later if caps allow.
It's just staggering when you lay it out like that. The real win isn't just the $170,000 tax saved up front on the death benefit, though that's significant. It's the millions, in your example, over $3 million extra in family wealth created purely because that money was moved earlier and allowed to compound in the tax-advantaged super environment for decades longer. That is genuinely transformative legacy planning.
Absolutely. So wrapping things up a bit, SMSFs, they offer incredible flexibility, direct control, access to unique strategies like these, and obviously very significant tax advantages. But as we've said, they're not for everyone. They demand discipline. You need to stay compliant, get good advice, and generally need a decent balance to make the costs worthwhile compared to industry funds. We've covered some complex rules today, but hopefully given you the key takeaways without getting bogged down.
Exactly. The core message really is that SMSFs can be much more than just a vehicle for your own retirement income. They provide this powerful framework for really strategic, long-term, intergenerational wealth planning. Combining things like the in-fund recontribution strategy with this more proactive early transfer strategy, families can potentially eliminate death benefits tax entirely, lock wealth into that concessional tax environment for decades longer, and build financial legacies that truly last.
So when managed properly, an SMSF isn't just about retirement. It can be a cornerstone of a multi-generational wealth strategy designed to benefit your family long after you're gone. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive today.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. What could your family's multi-generational financial story look like if you started thinking about these kinds of strategies?
Something to ponder, definitely. We hope you found this useful. Continue exploring and see how these insights might apply to your own journey.